sit down and eat at a restaurant, and then somebody comes up to you and asks you to go and eat your meal in the restroom because they don't care for the way that you're eating. They say that it's rude or it's offending. How exactly would you feel about that? Mothers face this all the time, and so do their infants. They have to stop their feedings, and they have to get up and either leave the restaurant altogether, or they have to go to the restroom. It wouldn't be very comfortable to go and sit in the restroom and eat your meal. Some infants don't take bottles or take pumped milk at all. I breastfed my son AJ, and he did not like bottles, and he did not like pumped out milk. He wanted it from mommy, and he wanted it to be absolutely fresh. When an infant is crying, it's usually because they're hungry, and when they are hungry and they're crying, they're going to continue to cry until they're being fed. If you're in a restaurant or you're in a public place, period, it's going to be a lot more distracting and a lot more noticeable to hear a crying infant than it's going to be to see a quiet breastfeeding infant. Mothers get harassed and get snickered at, pointed at, and have rude comments made to them all the time. Some of the benefits to breastfeeding are for the infant's better immune system because it's made specifically for them, has the antibodies in it to help fight off infections. They have a higher IQ. They can fight obesity because their stomachs, they only eat enough. They know when they're hungry, they know when they're full, and they only eat enough to fill up their tiny stomachs. Whereas formula infants, they end up needing more because they need more of the vitamins, more of the nutrients inside of it to get what they would get from a small amount of breastfeeding. With mothers, it helps fight off postpartum depression. It's an added birth control. It helps prevent breast cancer. It helps prevent osteoporosis. And it also burns 500 calories a day. For mothers and infants, they end up bonding very quickly because they're connected in a very special way with a need, and they get to eat, and mother's the only person that can do it. When mothers are out in public, they're getting harassed. They have mean and hurtful things said to them about breastfeeding when they're not bothering anybody at all. People say terrible things about breastfeeding in public and breastfeeding in general, and it ends up making a lot of mothers not want to breastfeed. Mothers are often asked to leave places altogether, and infants have their meals stopped or interrupted. When it comes to the federal government, they're on board 100% with public breastfeeding, with breastfeeding in general. In 1999, according to the Washington Post, Bill Clinton signed the Right to Breastfeed Act as part of an appropriations bill. The law ensures a woman's right to breastfeed on any federal property where she and her infant are permitted to be. According to the WikiLeaks, the state governments have 3 different types of breastfeeding laws in public. Currently, the strongest state laws are those that protect both the woman's right to breastfeed anywhere she and her child have the right to be, regardless of whether or not the breast is showing, and it also gives the woman the power to take legal action against anyone who interferes with her breastfeeding. Other state laws establish a woman's right to breastfeed, but they don't provide a way for her to ensure it and protect it, as the first one does. The last one is that the act of breastfeeding is not considered indecent exposure, and a woman cannot be charged with a sex crime for breastfeeding in public. So far I've asked you to think about what it would be like for somebody to come and ask you to go and eat your meal in the restroom because they didn't like the way you were eating. You were being harassed and having mean things said to you while you were eating. And I've asked you to think about the benefits of breastfeeding for the mother and the infant, and then I've told you about the state laws and the government laws. The society has come to think of breasts as sexual objects. When you ask somebody what they think about when they hear the word breast or boob, the most common answer is going to be they think about something sexually related and not about breastfeeding at all, when breasts are in fact made solely for feeding children. Milk comes in when a woman has her baby, and you can either choose to breastfeed or you can choose not to, but it comes in because it's meant for us, our breasts are made for us to feed our babies. When you see a magazine cover with a woman in a skimpy outfit or somebody walking in a bikini on a beach that barely covers anything at all, people don't think anything about it. They go on and they ignore it and they turn their heads if they don't like it. But when someone is seen breastfeeding in public, showing way less skin than the magazine cover or the woman in the bikini, they get harassed and they have comments made about them and towards them, and there's absolutely no reason to when she is showing way less skin than the woman in the magazine cover and the woman in the bikini on the beach. Breastfeeding is the exact same thing as bottle feeding. They are no different. The baby is getting fed in both ways. One just happens to be in a bottle and the other happens to come from the breast. If society would change its views on breastfeeding and see that the woman breastfeeding is really no different than the woman in the bikini or the woman on the magazine cover and shows less skin, then breastfeeding in public would become a much more acceptable thing and wouldn't be considered so rude or offending or gross or insanitary like it's commonly seen as. Things that can be done to help make breastfeeding in public more acceptable is when you see a woman breastfeeding her infant, say something encouraging for others around to see so that they see it's not a problem for somebody else and it might not have even noticed it at first. And it gives the mother encouragement, makes her feel better about what she's doing and not so stressed and anxious about it. The second thing that you can do is if you see a woman breastfeeding and somebody harassing her, you can politely and confidently go and stand up for them without causing a big scene. Let that person know that it's not a big deal and it's not hurting anything, and maybe even tell them how would they feel if they were eating their meal. Somebody asked them to go eat it in the germ-infested restroom or go out to the car, have to leave the place altogether just because didn't like the way you were eating. Something else you can do is you can go and speak to businesses about putting up signs that clearly state whether they care if you breastfeed in their building, in their business, or if you would rather them go and do it somewhere else. That way there's no confusion. Anybody says anything to them, they can say, the sign says it's all right. Something else you can do, Missouri is one of the states that does not have an enforcement law for breastfeeding. Missouri says it is okay for a woman to breastfeed, but it does not allow her to enforce her right to by taking legal action against anyone. You can go and find out how you can get that type of law to be brought up, and you can go and vote on it the next time it's up for election or voting, whichever. The last thing you can do, and another easy thing to do, is to just educate yourself on breastfeeding and the benefits of it, and look at the public laws and things that have happened to women who have breastfed in public and see how it's not terrible at all and how it shows a lot less skin than the woman in the magazine cover did and the woman in the bikini does. And society would become much more accepting of it if everybody would just educate themselves on it. And that's the end.